Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the inaugural episode, so I'm back in the building. So I used to podcast before. What's going on, y'all? This is Amadi J, and this is Becoming Abraham. Yes, another podcast. Yes, another podcast, if you can imagine that. So, what is becoming Abraham? What are we doing here? Why are you here? You got on this link here. Someone sent it to you. You stumbled across it. You saw a short or a link or something or a post. How did you get here? Well, there's a lot of conversation online. Heck, there's a lot of conversation in real life about manhood and masculinity and fatherhood and marriage and relationships and all these different things. And all of them, need to be discussed. They do. They need to be talked about, and we need to have conversation, and people need to, make some decisions and sort of come to some realizations. But, one of the things that I have found and why we even decided to launch this podcast, and I say we because this is going to be a family affair. I'm on here initially laying some things down, but you're going to see my family. My son, he's going to be with me a lot on here. You'll see my wife and my daughters. Yeah, I'm a family guy. Not Peter Griffin, but I am a family guy. But in all seriousness, when you're the first, right? When you're the first to do something, there's something significant about that. And so, just as I stated, if you're doing marriage or fatherhood or masculinity or femininity or relationships or manhood or any of these things that people talk about, they're all great in theory, right? All of them are wonderful. You hear something deep and you're like, man, that's deep. Oh, wow, that's powerful. But in actuality, someone still has to step out, right? You may be the person that has to step out and walk it out, right? You have to execute. And for many of us, myself included, we may be the first. We may be the first person that we've seen do the thing or, entered into that arena. We may be the first. And so there's a lot of weight that comes along with that. So that's sort of the basis, the catalyst for this, for what we're going to embark upon with Becoming Abraham. I don't know if this is going to be a short series, if this is going to be multi-year, multi-season endeavor. I still don't know right now. I'm hoping that it's something worthwhile. There are a lot of areas that I've experienced that I'm in, and I'm still curious about. In many of my conversations with people, and I do have a lot of conversations. I'm not just saying that to push along some statements, but you talk to people and you listen, and you hear some of the trepidation, you hear some of the fear, and it's like, whoa, they know that something has to happen, but they're a little unsure, right? And when you're the first to do something, there's a little bit of anxiety, right? There's a little bit of fear. There's a little bit of fear that comes along with being the first. Let me give you a couple examples. Let's say you're the first person to go to college in your family. For many, that's still their testimony. Or maybe you are the first to start a business, right? Maybe you want to be an entrepreneur, and everybody who's around you, everybody in your family, just works a job. And I'm not throwing shade to anybody, right? I work a job. Right? My wife and I were also starting a business. We've kind of gotten a couple contracts and gotten some things off the ground, but for the time being, to keep things tight on the home front, I still have a job. Right? As a matter of fact, I have two. That's the Jamaican in me. I have a Jamaican background, so may I have two jobs. Me can't just have one job. But in all seriousness, you might be the first to start a business. Might be the first entrepreneur in your circle, in your family. It's a lot of fear. It's a lot of trepidation. Again, if you're the first college student, first time being away from home, living on your own, it's a little bit of, fear and anxiety, a little unsurety that can come along with that. But you have to be the first, all right? You got to be the first. So you have to find your why. Shout out to Mufasa over here. Shout out to Mufasa. Got to make sure that I'm pointing in the right direction. There we go. Shout out to Mufasa. I'm gonna try to have some different pictures on the back. I got a couple. I got T'Challa over here. To any of my Black Panther fans, and I got MC over there rocking the microphone. I was an MC in a past life. I used to, I put out a couple of underground hip hop albums. So if you want to do your Googles, you can go search Divinimous. Hence the name Divinimous Media. That's where all this comes from. But you still got to be the first, right? And with that fear, with that anxiety, with that unsurety, you still got to step out there and be the first to do whatever you're trying to do. And so what we thought to do here with Becoming Abraham was for almost everybody, right? You're going to be the first to do something, right? You might not be the first to do those two examples I just mentioned, but you're going to do something. You're going to be the first person to do something, right? You may be the first person named you to do whatever it is you're going to do. You're going to do something. We're all going to do something. I may be the first guy to start a podcast called Becoming Abraham. I don't know. I did my searches. As the folks say now, I did my research. Everybody does research like they got lab coats. Like they got lab coats and beakers in a laboratory. They're doing the research. But no, definitely go read your books. I'm just being funny. But you're going to be the first. And so because we know that that's the case, you're going to be the first to do something. It's always important that you try to do it from a mature perspective. It's critical. It's critical that you approach things maturely from a mature perspective. You got to do your best to maturely approach things. You can't just do stuff. Sometimes folks are just out here and they're just doing things. People are just doing stuff, aimlessly just doing things, not really approaching it from any particular vantage point. Just, well, we're here now. Let's just go ahead and do it. And you have to, you have to approach things from a mature perspective. You have to sometimes sit down and, it may not be 6 months, but take a minute, assess what you got to do, put together a little strategy, a little plan, because you have to do it, because some things are just necessary. You're not going to be able to avoid it, right? Getting older, if you're in your 20s, guess what? You will not always be in your 20s. One day you're going to be in your 40s. If you're a teenager listening right now, you're not going to always be a teenager. One day you're going to be in your 20s or your 30s. So you're not going to always be the age that you are. Some things are going to happen. You're going to get older, right? You're going to lose people in your life. If you live long enough, you're going to experience loss. Someone's going to pass away. So there are just things in life that are going to happen. There are things that are necessary, right? And one of the things that we have to understand is that when something is necessary, your agreement is not always the priority. Like, you don't have to agree, right? When something is necessary, you don't have to agree. We've made agreement like the pinnacle. And yes, we have to agree on a lot of stuff. You got to agree. But when things are necessary, we don't necessarily need to agree at the moment. We can work it out. Let's get to a point where we kind of work it out. But right now, there is something that needs to happen. It's necessary, right? You get into a car accident and someone's injured, get them to the hospital. We can decide if you want to get a rental car and agree on the type of car later, or we can decide if you want to, try to fix the thing yourself or go through insurance. You can decide those things later, right? But what's necessary at the moment is that person or people get to the hospital to get injuries treated, right? Do you understand? So there are things in life that are necessary, but we may not agree on it at the moment. We can agree eventually, but your agreement is not necessarily required at the moment, right? It's not the number one priority when something's necessary. Let me give you another example. There are tons of studies, you can go read them and, go look them up. Honestly, you can Google tons of them where it is, and there are some done by the government. There are some done by private organizations, but many studies show the benefit of children that live in two-parent homes, right? You live in your home with both parents. We know the benefits: high school graduation rates, teen pregnancy rates, stuff like that, getting into drugs, et cetera, et cetera. We know all the benefits. You can go study the data and see the benefits. Don't argue with me, argue with the numbers. You don't have to argue with me, right? Now, that's an example of something that is probably necessary for the benefit of children. Once you go see the numbers, right? You look at the numbers, you see the benefit. You're like, oh, this is extremely beneficial. We should probably try to institute this more, right? Now, we can get into the nuance of single parent homes and X, Y, and Z. Again, no shade to anybody. I was raised by a single parent after high school. My parents split up when I was a freshman in high school. So my mom held it down for the rest of my high school years from me and my sister. So again, I'm not here to throw any shade at any single parent. If you are a single parent and you're holding it down, God bless you, because it's me and my wife in here, and sometimes we feel like we losing the battle. So you by yourself, you holding it down, man, salute to you, right? That's not for you. This is not a shot at the single parent. This is to just make a point that we know there are benefits to children who live in two-parent homes, right? So I don't need for you or me to agree on the nuance of single-parent homes. If the single-parent home is what ends up happening, okay, we'll make it do what it do. We'll make lemonade from these lemons. But going into it, right, we don't have to agree. We can look at the data and see, okay, it's probably more beneficial if we can raise these kids in a two-parent home. They'll get the masculine and the feminine. They'll get the both sides, the benefit of having a mother and a father. Like, they'll get all of that. The data shows it. Okay, so that's another example of when it's necessary, agreement is not always a number one priority. Again, because why? Some things in life are necessary. If a baby is born, that baby needs to be raised, right? The child is here. And this is not, an abortion conversation. This is just, I'm talking about in general. When a human being is born, someone needs to raise that child or they will not survive. Parents, another loved one, another guardian, the state, foster care system. Somebody has to do something. We aren't like animals. The baby can't just be born and start walking in 3 days, and someone has to raise the baby. And in order for that to happen, right, this is all I'm hoping just sort of laying the groundworks of my thought process and how we're getting to raising, becoming Abraham and how we even got here. This is just our initial sort of, inaugural episode here. Choices have to be made. You got to make choices. So we got things in life have to happen that are necessary, right? Agreement isn't always the number one priority when a thing is necessary. Sometimes you may be the first to do a thing. All that right in front of us. For most of us, that's going to be in front of us at some point in our lives. That's going to be in front of us. And so in order for us to do that, we've got to make choices. How to move, how to build different relationships, right? There are going to be some things that we are going to have to do. And what I mean by that is if I'm going to decide to do something, then I'm going to have to make a decision. All right, if I want to do this thing, I'm going to have to move a certain way to do this thing, right? If I'm going to get a new job, if I'm going to start a business, I got to do this. If I want to get in shape, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have to move a certain way, build a certain way, do certain things different. I'm going to have to cut off certain relationships. Hey, listen, I want to get married, so I'm going to have to cut some of these ladies off. I can't be hanging out with the fellas all night anymore because I'm trying to be dedicated to my lady. I'm moving towards marriage. Like, there are some things that I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have to make some decisions, right? I'm going to have to make some decisions if I am going to decide to do this thing. It's always better to decide to not do it than to do it halfway. A lot of times people decide to do something before they're actually willing to do it. If you're not willing, be honest and say, I'm unwilling to do this at this moment. I need to change. Don't have children just because you were horny and you were having unprotected sex, because that child will come into the earth, right? And now there are decisions that have to be made. Don't marry that woman or that man if you know you are unwilling to be committed to them. Don't do it. Don't go to college if you're unwilling to buckle down and do the kind of work that's required to get a college degree. Don't start a business if you're not willing to be dedicated to doing the things that are necessary to make a business succeed. Don't buy a house if you're unwilling to keep up with the maintenance and, all the different things that are required in owning a home. Don't buy a car if you don't want to keep up with the maintenance on an automobile. Like, just all of the things that are required to do some of these things. You got to decide. And again, it's even more difficult when you're the first, because let's say, all right, Amadi, all right, I get it. I am willing. I want to do it, but I don't know what it looks like. I'm willing to start my own business. I'm ready. I'm willing to cut things out of my life. I'm ready to lock in. I'm ready to do what it takes. I'm ready to go to college. I'm trying to get an education. I want to move up in life or whatever, right? I'm ready to be married. I'm ready to be dedicated to this one woman or this one man. I am ready to be committed. Okay, cool. But I just don't know what it looks like, right? I don't know what it looks like to be committed to one person for the rest of my life. I want to be committed, but I'm not sure what the process is, right? I want to be locked in and start a business and really rock and roll, but I'm not sure what all of that looks like. That's fine. At least we are honest. People are unwilling to be honest. Say, hey, I am really willing to do this stuff, but I just don't know what it looks like. And that's becoming Abraham. That's what it looks like. Because honesty is part of a mature perspective. Too many people are unwilling to be honest. That's a major component to maturity. Sometimes you're going to approach a particular subject or a particular situation or a circumstance, and you might be ready and willing and able, but just are not knowledgeable. hey, I don't know what to do here. I want to do it, but I'm not sure what to do. And that's Abraham. So you may wonder, all right, Amadi, how does that, what you just described, equate to becoming Abraham? Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of my backstory now, just a little taste. And hopefully you'll understand a little bit how I got to this concept of becoming Abraham. So, for myself, I choose to follow the God of the Bible, right? And there's a man in the Bible by the name of Abraham. He was first called Abram. And to make a long story short, it's stated in the book of Genesis. You can read this in the Bible. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. And I get it. That might not be everybody's cup of tea. But it's mine. It's what I've chosen to do. It's the way I've chosen to live my life. In Genesis, God calls Abram. And he says a statement to him. He says, hey, take your wife and all your belongings and leave your father's house, not his physical house, but his household, and go to the place where I'm going to send you. And Abraham, kind of hems and haws a little bit, kind of, what? Wait a minute, say what now? But ultimately, he makes the decision to follow where he felt like God was leading him. And along that journey, he encounters a tremendous amount of firsts, right? Because he's the first to kind of come out of that people group and to go and do a different thing. So much so that future generations of God's people in the Bible, they would say things like, hey, we are children of Abraham, or we follow the God of Abraham, stuff like that. They would say those kinds of things later on in the Bible, if you read the Bible. He encountered a lot of firsts, right? He had to overcome a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. And you see, and it's in the Bible. Again, if you go back and look at some of his experiences in Genesis, he had to overcome a lot of firsts, ultimately to become who he was destined to be. And for many of us, that's going to be the case. We're going to have to overcome a lot of our own fears and insecurities to be who we are destined to become. And so that's why for myself, I saw a lot of parallels, because there were a lot of things in my own life where you're like, all right, I'm ready to do this thing. How do you do it now? What do you do? Right? I'm willing to sort of jump into this. All right, but what do you do exactly? And that's critical. That is critical. It's critical to have some knowledge, right? You got to be willing. That's like great, because a lot of people are not willing. Once you're willing, and you get the knowledge, and those two things kind of come together, man, you can start rocking and rolling, right? Whether it is things like discipline or financial stability, wanting to be one who budgets and manages finances properly, or whether you want to be someone who's moral and ethical. Like there are a lot of different things, learning self-control and being sober-minded, right? There's a lot of areas in our lives where we're willing to make changes, we're willing to make decisions, but we're just not knowledgeable enough yet. Not knowledgeable enough, not wise enough yet to really walk it out. And in those moments, I have found we're kind of like Abraham, right? You want to get married? Well, all the people in my family, they either not married, or a bunch of folks divorced, or no one never got married. They just been, we say we just messing, I'm just messing with her. That's just, we just been together. People have those kind of terminologies. A bunch of broken homes all over the place. Again, no shade, but that's just kind of the reality for many of us. And now you're like, all right, I want to start a committed relationship. I want to kind of make this thing work. But I'm not knowledgeable because I've never seen it before. Well, in that particular instance, we may be like Abraham, right? Because we got to cross a first, like crossing a bridge. This is like we're the first in this respect. So in that respect, someone has to be Abraham. and it might be you. And you don't get the benefit. You don't get the benefit of going second. Right? Because when you're second, you get to look at the first and be like, oh, oof. All right, I'm not going to go that way. Let's try go over here, right? You don't get the benefit of seeing the first, seeing where they screwed up, and then saying, all right, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to go a different way this time, right? That's the benefit of going second. Hey, it's great. It's wonderful. But when you got to be the first, you got to be the one to fight the dragon. You got to be the one to step out into the darkness, kind of walk on water, so to speak, to use another biblical reference. You got to be the first. And there's some fear. There's some anxiety. There's a little bit of trepidation that comes along with that. But like I stated earlier, somebody has to be an Abraham, right? Somebody has to make choices. You got to make choices. And now others will be able to see those choices, and they will be able to learn, grow, expand, what have you, from the fact that you made those choices. Because what happens is when we don't make the choices, and many of us have probably, when I give this description, many of you guys are going to be able to identify. Unfortunately, what happens, right? How many of us have had to experience some stuff because someone who went before us chose not to finish, right? A parent, a loved one, an older sibling, somebody who was supposed to do a thing, impacted us, and now we are left to either have to finish the thing, right? We're left holding that unfinished thing. Whatever it is, we are now impacted because someone who went before us has now impacted our future because they chose to not finish. Many times you see this, when a father leaves a home, right, and the children are having to be raised by a single mom, or vice versa. Mom leaves a home and children are having to be raised by a single dad. Well, there are many gaps. There are just gaps, right? I love my children, right? I have 3 children. I love my children. But there's no way that I would be able to teach my daughters how to become women the way that my wife would. Now, I love my kids. I would do my best. I lay down my life. I do everything for them. But if it were just up to me, my daughters might have some gaps because dad would not have been able to adequately teach them, the girls, how to become women, how to become mothers, wives, etc. I would have done my best. I would have. I'd have rolled up my sleeves and done my best. But there might have been a gap, and vice versa. If I'm not around, my wife loves my son. And she would have rolled up her sleeves and she would have got busy in there. But there may have been some gaps because she's not going to be able to show my son areas that he has to grow in and walk in to be a man. There are just going to be gaps. And that's what happens to a lot of us when those who go before us sort of abdicate responsibility in certain areas. We are impacted, right? So that's a little bit of my story. That's why we're here. That's the sort of goal of becoming Abraham, is to really sort of put some of those, to do multiple things. Identify those areas, right? We're going to talk through some of those practical areas, not just in the theoretical. A lot of people have a lot of great theoretical ideas. Oh, you got to do this and you should be doing that. And there's actually this comedian, I forget his name, heavyset black dude on Facebook. He talks about how a lot of podcast hosts are like, oh, you're not doing this. It's because you're not making no money. You got to do this. You got to come out of here. It's like, I'm not trying to be that. I'm really trying to put the connection, make the connection for folks, that we talk through. All right, here's a wonderful theoretical idea. And here's the end result. Well, let's talk through some of those ways in which we can connect that theoretical idea to the end result and sort of give a couple of steps, all right? And one of the first things that we already talked about here today, being honest enough, because honesty is a part of maturity. The way in which we kind of get to those end goals is, I believe, through a mature perspective. And you can't have maturity if you're unwilling to be honest, right? If you're unwilling to be honest, you're going to have a hard time approaching the area from a mature perspective. I hope this has been beneficial for you. Come back, and listen some more. But again, this won't just be me. I intend on, like I said, this is going to be a family affair for me. I'm going to have my son on here. He's going to be holding it down with me. My wife, my daughters. It's going to be a family affair. I hope to have some subject matter experts, as we talk through different areas, different experts in different fields. And then, again, we tie these things together to make the connections, because one of the things that has to happen for you, right? I've seen this. I've read this. I try to read a lot of different books, and I've seen it with my own two eyes. I've walked it out in many respects, and this is critical. When you are I'm just gonna continue to use that term. When you are the Abraham, right? When you are the Abraham in whatever particular area that might be, you're having to walk through and experience. You are the Abraham right now. You're the woman or the man who's the first to do this thing. And you get, you got to wrestle with the unsurety and the anxiety and the fear. So that's the second part. So you're honest, and then you confront the anxiety and the fear. Confront it, right? Now, one of the things that you must do, you have to have a why. You have to have a why. Why am I even doing this? You're the Abraham. Remember, you're becoming Abraham. You're confronting this thing for the first time. You're overcoming this first. Why? Why am I even doing this? You have to have a why. If you don't have a why, trust me, you are going to want to quit. And in many cases, you probably are going to quit. So you have to have a why. You have to have a why. And it has to be solidified in your heart that this is why I am doing this thing. This is why. Okay? This is why. Now, I'm going to give you an example from my own life. So I told you a little bit about my backstory. My parents separated when I was a freshman. I was a freshman in high school. I was about 14. I think you're about 14. Freshman in high school. I had just started high school. I hadn't been in high school but for a couple months. And my parents separated. And at that point, I just didn't see my dad anymore. He was gone. It wasn't like one of those things, oh, you go to your dad's for the weekend and, or holidays and that. Well, none of that. Remember, my dad left. He got his things. He came and got his things. We had to move from where we were living. We were in a house. We had to move to an apartment. And my dad got his stuff, and he was gone. He was gone. And at that point, I didn't see my dad for years after that. And, it had an impact because that's right in the stage of life where, boy is becoming a young man. You're learning a lot of different things. Okay. You're learning how to drive, learning about girls, learning about money, learning about sex, self-control, discipline, all the different things that you're going to need coming into manhood. All right. Well, that's right at that critical stage of my life is when, my life really shifted and changed. And as I got older, coming into adulthood, I'm now a young man. I've graduated college and, I'm working, got a professional career now, doing some different things. And I remember I'm with my wife and I, we weren't married yet at the time. My wife that I'm with now, not my current wife, my only wife. I've seen that little joke online. I was like, well, my current wife. No, she is not my current wife. She is my only wife. She's going to watch this and be like, what is he talking about? My wife and I, we were not married. And I just, we started to talk about marriage and prepare for marriage. And, we eventually got married, obviously, because I've been married for nearly 21 years. And I remember thinking to myself, and this is where I got my why. This is where I got my why, because you start thinking about marriage, and obviously you begin to think about children. And I said, you know what? And I've only heard one other person articulate it the way that I'm about to share. And shout out to my brother, Jason Wilson. Go support that brother. Go to his YouTube, and I buy Jason's books and all of that. I'm actually doing a book study right now for one of his books with some men. But I decided that I was going to be the father that I wanted when I was coming up. I said, you know what? I'm going to be that man. I'm going to be the man that I want, rather than harboring anger and resentment and bitterness and all these different things. I'm just going to be to my children what I wanted when I was 13, 14, 15, 16. Right? That's who I want to be. That was my why, because I realized I'm going to cross, and I had already been crossing a lot of firsts, and I'm going to cross even more firsts. I'm going to cross some more. So I got to have my why. Got to have a why. And that was my why. In that moment, I realized that is my why. The reason I am willing to push through all of these firsts is because I want to be the father that I wanted when I was an adolescent, when I was a young man, when I was coming up, right? Learning how to shave. They're really basic things, right? Learning how to shave, learning how to drive. Not even the big stuff. We can get to the big stuff, but I mean just very small, minor things. How to tie a tie. Yeah. Just very, very, very minor, small things. I had to get my why. And that in that moment, I got my why. There are just going to be some questions we got to answer. We got to answer these questions. We have to, make some of these decisions. And then we got to walk these out. Got to walk these things out. And so that, again, is what we hope to achieve here on Becoming Abraham. All right? Approaching these things from a mature perspective, being honest, wrestling through the fears and unsurety and anxiety, making decisions, finding our why, and then walking some of these things out to get to those expected goals, right? If we can do that, I believe, because I've seen it in my own life, that we will gain some successes. We're not going to always have success, but we will gain some successes. We will have some wins. We'll get some wins. We will get some wins. There won't be a bunch of losses. There'll be some losses. There may be a loss here or there as we sort of wrestle through some stuff, but you will begin to get more wins than losses. And then you'll get to this place, and I'm going to end here. I read a book by Dr. Corbett Galden, and he, in his book, it's called A Holy Nation, what he said was, in the book, he said, I'm going to use the term normal. And he said, when you hear normal, I don't want you to think of it as the way things are. He said, but it's really the way that I'm describing the way things should be. So I'm going to use this term normal. But from here on out, that's what I mean when I use normal. Not what you see when you're outside and people are living and carrying on, but in the ways in which we should be aspiring to be. And that is, what I believe for us that we would get to that place of having a new normal. As we make these decisions, as we find our why, and we walk some of these things out and execute, that we would get to that place of a new normal, right? Choice is one of the most powerful things we as human beings have, right? Everything we do is not always based off instinct. We have the ability to make choices. We can make choices. It's powerful. I've performed several weddings in my life. And one of the things that I tell the couples, when we're doing counseling, when we're doing the marriage counseling leading up to the ceremony, I'll ask them one question. And, if any of them are listening to this, they'll get a laugh out of it. They'll get a laugh out of it when they hear this, because they know exactly what I'm doing, what I'm about to mention. And it is this. I say, hey, do you love this person? Yeah. All right. And you love them? Oh, yeah, of course. And I say, I'm not sure if you do. What do you mean, Amadi? I say, I believe you're infatuated with them. I believe you're infatuated. Oh, they're just so cute. Everything they do is just so lovable. That's how it is. When you're new in a relationship. For those of you who are in relationships, you remember that stage. But love is a choice, because I tell them, I say, infatuation will wear off. And then that thing that used to be so adorable pisses you off. The thing that used to just be so cute and adorable now drives you crazy. Now what do you do when the thing that was so adorable drives you insane? What do? Well, you got one of two things you could do. Continue to let it drive you insane until the point where it severs your relationship, or you can choose to love the person. Now, people can make changes and adjustments, but that has no impact on your choice to love them. All right? I choose to love in spite of the person, because it may take them years to change a thing, if they're going to change at all. There may be some things that's just part of their character. Let's say your spouse snores, or your spouse sweats a lot, or your spouse runs cold, or different things like that. There's a bunch of different things, right? That may not change. It may not change. All right. You got to choose to love them. And I'm being very, specific in the things I'm going to name, and I'm not going to name, because I'm not talking about safety. If there are environments that are unsafe, that's not what I'm referencing. Okay. So I don't want this to be taken. I don't want this to be taken in a different, context where, so-and-so. No. If someone is in an unsafe environment, they need to get out of there, and we can deal with that separately. But I'm just talking about in general, where people say, I have fallen out of love with you. All right. And I say, you've fallen out of love. Just say what it is. Like we talked about initially, being honest. If you can be honest, then you can be mature. The real answer is, I am unwilling to continue to love you, right? I am choosing to no longer love you. That's the real honest answer. And that's fine too, if that's your honest answer, but people are unwilling to say that. You think you always feeling your kids? Sometimes you're not feeling your kids. Just like, look, I'm not feeling these kids today, but I still choose to love them, right? That's the difference. That's the difference. So we have to find our why, answer those questions, right? Find our why, walk it out, until we get to that place of a new normal. All right. So again, I'm going to stop there. hope this is, helpful. Like I said, we're going to be really talking about a lot of different questions and topics that, I have found interesting over the years that I've seen people wrestle with and wrestle through. And I hope this brings, for those of you who come back and listen some more, I hope this brings you, closer to your goal, closer to that end goal of walking in who you were destined to become. But you got to be willing to cross these firsts. I'm putting them in quotations. Got to be willing to cross these firsts. And when you cross them, right, these pieces that we talked about today, I hope will be helpful for you. Be honest. Confront those fears and anxieties that will arise. Have a why. Why are you doing this? All right? Be willing to walk it out and ultimately get to a new normal. So thank you guys for listening. All right. Again, this is Becoming Abraham. I'm Amadi J. I hope that this has been beneficial to you, and I look forward to you checking us out the next time. All right. So we will be at divemedia.co. That's the website. We'll be on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube. Click the thumbs up button, like and subscribe, all those things. We're going to have the videos available for download. We will also have the audio companion on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, all those different things. So again, listen, be built up, man, and God bless y'all.